Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome once again to Frank Sterling's Radio Theater. I'm your host, Frank Sterling, and tonight I invite you to step back in time with me to a very different America. An America at war. An America of hope and sacrifice. An America where dreams were born in the most unexpected places. Tonight's story takes us to the summer of 1944, to the bustling aircraft factories of California, where millions of American women rolled up their sleeves and picked up tools to build the arsenal of democracy. It was a time when the world hung in the balance, when every rivet, every painted surface, every small contribution mattered in the grand tapestry of victory. But this isn't just a story about war, my friends. This is a story about dreams, about a young woman named Norma Jean who painted airplane parts by day and painted pictures of her future by night. It's about that moment when opportunity knocks, and you must choose between the safety of the known and the uncertainty of the possible. You see, sometimes the most extraordinary lives begin in the most ordinary circumstances. Sometimes a factory worker becomes a legend, and sometimes a single photograph changes everything. Tonight, we'll witness such a transformation, a story of courage, choice, and the shadows that dreams cast on our lives. So settle in, dear listeners, pour yourself a cup of coffee, dim the lights, and let me tell you about a time when America was changing and how one young woman changed along with it. If you enjoy tonight's tale, please subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring you more stories from the golden age of American radio. And now, let us journey back to June 1944. To the Van Nuys Industrial District, where the California sun is just beginning to warm the asphalt and where dreams are about to take flight. This is Dreams in Shadow. Prologue. Morning in Van Nuys.
June 1944. The California sun had not yet warmed the asphalt of the Van Nuys Industrial District when the first workers were already hurrying to the gates of the radio plane company. Their heels beat a steady rhythm on the sidewalk, mixing with the distant hum of aircraft engines. The air smelled of machine oil, fresh paint, and that special scent of hope that hung over all of America in those days when everyone knew they were approaching victory. Among these women walked 18-year-old Norma Jean Doherty. Her blonde hair was neatly tucked under a scarf in the Victory Roll style, and a barely noticeable smile played on her lips. That very smile that would conquer the world in a few years, but for now only brightened the morning walk to the factory. In her hands, she carried a metal lunchbox and a thermos of coffee, and in her heart, dreams that seemed as distant as the stars of Hollywood. The radio plane factory was one of thousands of enterprises that forged American Victory Day and night. Here, they produced unmanned target aircraft, OQ-3, small radio-controlled devices for training anti-aircraft gunners and fighter pilots. For Norma Jean, this was just a job for $20 a week and the feeling that she was contributing to the common cause. But sometimes, looking at these little airplanes, she dreamed of her own flight. Not in the literal sense, but of that flight that would carry her from this world of factory shifts into some other life, bright and amazing.
Chapter 1. An Ordinary Day.
The workday began at 7 in the morning with the long blast of the factory siren. Norma Jean changed into her work overalls and headed to her workplace in the painting shop. Her task was simple: coating drone bodies with special fire-resistant compound. The work was monotonous, but Norma Jean had learned to find her rhythm in it. She moved smoothly and confidently, as if dancing to music that only she could hear. Sometimes, colleagues noticed how she quietly hummed melodies by Frank Sinatra or Glenn Miller. "Hey, Norma," called out Betty Harrison, a woman of about 35. "Are you daydreaming again?" Norma Jean laughed. She had an amazing laugh, clear and sincere. "Just thinking about where these little ones will fly. Maybe one of them will help our boys somewhere in Europe." "You look at things too romantically," Betty shook her head, but there was no judgment in her voice. Everyone here loved Norma Jean for her ability to see beauty even in mundane work. During lunch break, the girls gathered in the break room where an old radio stood. Norma Jean listened as colleagues discussed letters from husbands and brothers at the front and felt a little guilty. She missed Jim, but not the way a wife should miss her husband. Instead, she dreamed of something indefinite, some other life. "What do you think, Norma?" Betty asked. "When the war ends, what will you do?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Maybe try something new. I've always dreamed of trying myself in movies or modeling." Several women laughed, but not maliciously. "You're certainly beautiful enough for that," said Dorothy, "but Hollywood is a cruel place." "I know," Norma Jean replied quietly, "but sometimes you have to try, right? Otherwise, how do you know what you're capable of?"
Chapter 2 Talks About War.
In the evening, Norma Jean sat in her small apartment near the factory. The apartment was modest, but for her, it was the first space of her own. The walls were decorated with magazine clippings, photos of Hollywood stars, fashionable dresses that fed her dreams. The radio played quietly in the corner, broadcasting evening news about the Allies' preparation for a decisive offensive in Europe. Norma Jean was writing a letter to Jim, but stopped, not knowing what to tell. What could she write? That she painted little airplanes every day? That she dreamed of something bigger? Instead, she wrote about the weather, about work, safe, mundane things that didn't betray her inner restlessness. The next day at the factory, there was special excitement. The radio reported that a major operation was being prepared in Europe. The women worked with even greater enthusiasm, understanding that their labor could bring the long-awaited victory closer. "Did you hear the news?" asked Mary. "They say our boys are preparing to land in France. The second front will finally open." Talk about war always evoked mixed feelings. Everyone wanted it to end, but the war had given many women opportunities they couldn't have dreamed of before. Factory work, their own salary, a sense of independence, all this could disappear when the men returned. Norma Jean thought about this often. What would happen to her when the war ended? Would she return to the role of housewife? This thought frightened her more than she was ready to admit. During lunch, Mr. Wilson, one of the foremen, came to see them. "Girls, I have news. A photographer from an army magazine is coming to visit us. They want to do a story about how American women are helping the front. We need volunteers for a photo shoot." Norma Jean felt her heart beat faster. The opportunity to appear in a magazine seemed exciting, but she didn't dare raise her hand immediately. "Will you participate, Norma?" Betty asked. Norma Jean hesitated. Part of her wanted to try, but another part was afraid. But then she thought about her dreams. "Yes," she said finally, "I think I'll try."
Chapter 3 The Photographer.
David Conover was a young man of about 25, with kind eyes and the confident movements of a professional. He worked for the army magazine Yank, but when he saw Norma Jean, something stirred in him. This wasn't just beauty, this was something special, some inner luminosity that made the camera fall in love with the subject. "Hello," she said, somewhat shyly. "Mr. Wilson said you wanted to photograph me." David Conover, the photographer, introduced himself, and yes, I would very much like to take some pictures. The next hour passed like a dream. David photographed Norma Jean at work, and gradually she relaxed. David knew how to create an atmosphere where people forgot about the camera. "You're very photogenic," he said during a break. "Do you have any experience in modeling?" "No, none at all," Norma Jean blushed. "Have you ever thought about a career in Hollywood?" Norma Jean's heart beat faster. "Sometimes I think about it, but it seems so unattainable." "Hollywood is full of girls from small towns," David said. "It's not where you're from that matters, but what you have inside. And you have something special." After the official shoot, David asked permission to take a few portraits. They went outside where the light was softer. "Don't think about the camera," he said. "Think about something pleasant, about your dreams." Norma Jean closed her eyes and imagined herself on the big screen. When she opened her eyes and looked at the camera, David knew he had captured something magical. After the shoot, they sat in a small cafe. "I want to offer you something," David said. "I have connections at a modeling agency. I could show them your photographs." "Really?" Norma Jean couldn't believe it. "Do you really think I have a chance?" "I think you have more than just a chance. But you must understand, it won't be easy. Lots of rejections, lots of disappointments." "I understand, but if you don't try, then you'll never know," David finished for her. Norma Jean walked back to the factory as if in a fog. Could her childhood dreams really become reality? That evening, she sat by the window for a long time, looking at the lights of Los Angeles. Somewhere out there was Hollywood, and perhaps very soon she would become part of that world.
Chapter 4. D-Day.
On June 6, 1944, Norma Jean woke up to unusual noise on the street. She turned on the radio and immediately understood. This morning, Allied forces began landing on the coast of France. D-Day has finally arrived! At the factory, there was a special atmosphere. Everyone understood this was the beginning of the end of the war. Mr. Wilson allowed radios to be turned on in all workshops. "Can you imagine?" Betty said. "Maybe this little airplane will help a pilot who's fighting in France today." Norma Jean thought about Jim, about thousands of young Americans who were risking their lives for freedom. And she thought about how strangely life was arranged. While some fought, others painted airplanes in a quiet California workshop. During lunch, everyone gathered to listen to President Roosevelt's address. Norma Jean listened and felt pride and hope. She was part of this great cause, even if a very small part.
Today our valiant sons have begun the Great Crusade.
By evening, it became clear that the operation had succeeded. The second front was open. The streets were full of people, some crying with joy, some praying, some raising toasts to the speedy end of the war. At home, Norma Jean sat down to write a letter to Jim. Today was a special day, the day we've all been waiting for so long. Something else happened today. That photographer sent the pictures, and they turned out very well. He offered to show them to a modeling agency. I want to try. The world is changing, Jim, and I want to change too. She thought about the future. The photographs lay on the table next to the letter. In them was her, but somehow different. More confident, brighter, more star-like. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe on the day when the world began to change, she should change too.
Chapter 5. The Choice.
2 weeks had passed since D-Day. News from the front was encouraging. The Allies were advancing deep into France. But for Norma Jean, these weeks had been a time of inner struggle. David called twice, first to say the photographs were excellent, then to report that he had shown them to an acquaintance from a modeling agency and he was interested. "This isn't a guarantee," David warned, "but it's a chance, a real chance." Norma Jean felt fear and hope battling inside her. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part was afraid. What would Jim say? At work, colleagues noticed her distraction. "You're not yourself," Betty said. Norma Jean told her about the photographer's offer. "And what are you thinking of doing?" Dorothy asked. "I don't know. I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Everything. That it won't work out. That Jim won't understand. That I'll leave a reliable job for an impossible dream." Betty thoughtfully shook her head. "You know, dear, I've been working here for 15 years. I've seen many girls who dreamed of something bigger, but few dared to try. And then they regretted it." Mary added, "Listen, Norma, you're young, beautiful, you don't have children. If not now, then when? After the war, everything will change." That evening, Norma Jean spent in reflection. In one of his letters, Jim wrote, "War has taught me to value every opportunity. Life is too short for regrets." The next day, she called David. "I'm ready to meet your acquaintance." The meeting was scheduled for Saturday. Norma Jean spent almost her entire paycheck on a new dress, experimented with hairstyles, rehearsed in front of the mirror. Harry Lyons, the agency owner, carefully examined her, asked her to walk, turn, smile. "Interesting," he said. "You have something special. The camera senses it. I'm ready to offer several trial shoots. But I must warn you, this is not an easy path." "I'm ready," said Norma Jean, and realized she was telling the truth. That evening, she wrote Jim the most difficult letter of her life. "I must tell you about a decision I've made. I feel I must try. The world is changing, and I want to change too. Please understand me." For the first time in a long while, she felt alive, full of energy and hope. Ahead was uncertainty, but it was her uncertainty, her choice, her path.
Epilogue. Shadows of the Future.
August 1945. The war was over. Norma Jean no longer worked at the factory. She had devoted the last months to her modeling career. Things were going well. Catalogs, advertising, magazines. Harry said she had potential. Jim returned in May. The meeting was joyful but strange. They had both changed. Jim had become more serious, more silent, and she, more confident, independent, accustomed to making her own decisions. They tried to restore their relationship, but it wasn't easy. Jim wanted to return to their former life, but Norma Jean could no longer become a submissive housewife. Today, she was meeting David in the same cafe where a year ago they had talked after the first shoot. "How are things?" he asked. "Good. Harry says there might soon be an opportunity to try myself in movies." "And how's Jim?" "Complicated. We've become very different." "Do you regret your decision?" "No, not for a second. Even if nothing grand comes of it, I know I tried." David smiled. "Remember what I told you then? That you have something special? You'll see. In a few years, the whole world will know about you." At home, Jim was waiting for her. "Norma," he said quietly, "I've made a decision. I think we should give each other freedom." She wasn't surprised. Somewhere deep down, she had been waiting for this conversation. "Are you sure?" "Yes, we've both changed. You've found your path, and I don't want to stop you." They embraced, long, tenderly, saying goodbye not only to each other, but to the life that could have been. That night, Norma Jean thought about the future, about how tomorrow would begin a new chapter, about how she would be alone but freer than ever. She thought about the factory, about the girls she had worked with, about D-Day when the world changed, about the photographer who saw in her what she didn't see in herself. Years later, Few would remember that 18-year-old aircraft factory worker who painted little airplanes and dreamed of stars. Few would remember that day in June 1944 when a young photographer saw something special in her. But the shadows of that time would remain with her forever. Shadows of a dream that became reality. Shadows of war that taught her to value every opportunity. Shadows of the past that made the future possible. And somewhere in these shadows would forever remain Norma Jean Dougherty, the girl who believed in herself at the moment when the world began to change, and who changed along with it. The story was over. The legend was just beginning. Many years later, historians would argue about what exactly happened to Norma Jean during those war years. But one thing is known for certain. In 1944, an 18-year-old aircraft factory worker made a choice that changed not only her life, but the culture of the entire world. She believed in her dreams at the moment when dreams seemed possible. And perhaps that's the main lesson of her story. The most important decisions are made in moments of great change, when the whole world balances between past and future. Norma Jean chose the future, and the future chose her.
And so ends our tale of Norma Jean, dear listeners. A story of dreams deferred and dreams fulfilled, of choices made in moments of great change, and of the courage it takes to believe in yourself when the whole world is transforming around you. You know, friends, there's something profoundly American about Norma Jean's story. Here was a young woman working in a factory, contributing to the war effort, living a perfectly respectable life. But she dared to dream of something more. She dared to believe that her life could be extraordinary. And perhaps that's the lesson we can take from her journey. In our own lives, we all face moments when opportunity presents itself. Moments when we must choose between the comfortable and the unknown, between what is and what could be. The question isn't whether we'll face such moments, but whether we'll have the courage to say yes when they arrive. History tells us that Norma Jean's leap of faith led to something remarkable. But even if it hadn't, even if she had remained unknown to the world, her choice to pursue her dreams would still have been the right one. Because the greatest tragedy isn't failing to achieve our dreams, it's failing to pursue them at all. So as you go about your days, dear listeners, remember Norma Jean in that California factory, painting airplane parts and dreaming of stars. Remember that extraordinary lives often begin with ordinary courage. The courage to believe in yourself, to take a chance, to step into the unknown. Thank you for joining me tonight for another tale from Frank Sterling's Radio Theater. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know in the comments what dreams you're pursuing in your own life. Until next time, this is Frank Sterling reminding you that in a world of endless noise, sometimes the most powerful stories are told in the quiet moments between dusk and dawn. Sweet dreams, and remember, your story is still being written. Good night, dear listeners.
In a factory town where the warplanes grew, worked a girl with eyes of summer blue, painting wings that would never fly as high as the dream she kept alive inside.
She had $20 and a heart so wide. California sun was her only guide, but she knew that somewhere past the factory gate a different kind of future would wait.
They said, stay safe, stay small, stay where you are. But she was reaching for a distant star.
Dream like Norma Jean, believe in what you see. Every legend starts with just one leap of faith. Paint your future bright, step into the light. Don't let fear decide your fate. Dream like Norma Jean, the world is yours to claim. Every star begins with just a single flame. In your heart a light will always shine. Dream like Norma Jean and make your dreams divine. When the camera found her working there, something magic danced upon the air. Not just beauty, but a burning will to climb every mountain, every
She
sheer.
could have stayed safe in that factory line, but she chose to cross that thin red line.
Between the life that's given and the life you take, between the dreams you keep and the ones you made.
They said think twice, play nice, don't rock the boat.
But she was writing her own freedom note. Dream like Norma Jean, believe in what you see. Every legend starts with just one leap of faith. Paint your future bright, step into the light. Don't let fear decide your fate. Dream like Norma Jean, the world is yours to claim. Every star begins with just a single flame. In your heart a light will always shine. Dream like Norma Jean and make your dreams divine. From Van Nuys to the silver screen, she showed us what it means to dream. Not the ending, but the start of every brave and beating heart.
So when you're standing at your crossroads and you don't know which way to go,
Remember her and take that chance. Step forward to your own romance.
dream like Norma Jean, believe in what you see. Every legend starts with just one leap of faith. Paint your future bright, step into the light. Don't let fear decide your fate.
Dream like Norma Jean, the world is yours to claim. Every star begins with just a single flame. In your heart a light will always shine. Dream like Norma Jean and make your dreams divine. She painted planes but painted dreams much brighter. Every dreamer is a freedom fighter.
Dream like Norma Jean. Dream like Norma Jean.